Last week we were dealing with the verses 120 and 121. Verse 121, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned here that الَّذِينَ آتَيْنَاهُمُ الْكِتَابَ يَتْلُونَهُ حَقَّ تِلَاوَتِهِ أُولَٰئِكَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِهِ. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, as we discussed last week, that those who have been given the book, Al-Kitab, يَتْلُونَهُ, recite it, حَقَّ تِلَاوَتِهِ, recite it as it should be recited, a true recitation. أُولَٰئِكَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِهِ. These are the ones who believe in it, have faith in it. And we explained what that meant. A lot of the Mufassirun said that this refers to the people of the book, Ahlul Kitab, Bani Israel, the Christians and the Jews, that amongst them there are those who we have given them the book and they recite it properly as it should be recited. What does it mean? It means they read it, they understand it, and they follow the guidance in it that also indicates the truth of the Prophet ﷺ, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that the fact that he will be the final messenger, his description, the description of his companions, all of these things are in their books. So those who recite it properly, meaning without any change, without any omissions, they are the ones who will believe in it, believe in the messengership of the Prophet ﷺ, will believe in the book, will believe in the Qur'an when the Prophet ﷺ comes with his da'wah. We explained that. But one other important thing here to mention, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu an, the famous Sahabi, who was very learned in the Qur'an itself, he said that here, يَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابَ يَتْلُونَهُ حَقَّ تِلَاوَتِهِ, they recite it حَقَّ تِلَاوَتِهِ, they recite it as it should be recited, means two things. One is that they preserve the halal and the haram. They preserve the halal and the haram. Tilawa, to do proper tilawa of the Qur'an or the book or any revelation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent, is what? To preserve the halal and the haram. So when the Qur'an says this is haram, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands this is haram, the people who follow that command, who stay away from that prohibition in their lives, implement it in their lives, in their practical lives, and who remain within the halal that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made lawful for them. These are the people who do the recitation of the Qur'an as it should be recited. Tilawa is not simply just to read. Tilawa is not even simply just to recite with a beautiful voice. No, tilawa is to actually understand, read, understand, and implement. Follow the commands that are in the Qur'an. Preserve its halal, preserve its haram. Stay away from its haram. So this is what they do when they recite the Qur'an as it should be recited. The second thing he said is they read it without any change, without any tahrif. They do not change its words or its letters. So here's two things. One is they recite it properly as it should be read, correctly, each letter, each word, as it was revealed. But also they do not change any of the words in the book. They recite it without any change, without any omission, without any deletion. They keep the book as it was revealed. They recite it as it was revealed. They don't hide anything. They don't turn over a page which they don't like. They don't omit a verse which they don't like or they think it's too hard to implement. No, they recite it as it should be recited, meaning they recite every word, every letter as it has been revealed without any change. Without any change. And this is very important for us today with regards to the Qur'an. Although this verse, as according to most of the Mufassirun, is talking about Ahlul Kitab, that there are some amongst them who recite the book as it should be recited, and they're the ones who will believe in the messengership of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But also it's related very importantly to us as well, because this is talking about revelation. This is talking about the people who have been given revelation. Today, the Qur'an, we also need to recite it as it should be recited. We need to also preserve the halal and the haram of the Qur'an. Otherwise, what is the point of all these commands in the Qur'an? What is the point of all these verses that talk about halal and haram? Of course, the Qur'an is not only about halal and haram. The Qur'an essentially, primarily is about guidance, hidayah. It's the huda. It guides you to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It guides you to Jannah. It guides you to what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Halal and haram is a part of it. Fiqh and law and all that is a part of the Qur'an. But the whole Qur'an is not a book of fiqh. It's not a book of law. But it's a part of it. Many of the scholars said there's around 500 or more verses that deal with Islamic law, fiqh, sharia, in that sense. So the Qur'an definitely has halal and haram, but that's not the only thing in the Qur'an. But the point here is that as Muslims, we must observe the commands, the limits of the Qur'an. This is the main point. We must observe this in our daily lives. If we don't, we can we can do 20 khatams every year. We can do 2 khatams in Ramadan. Right? Just tilawah. We like to, in Ramadan, mashallah, because it's a blessed month, everybody is busy reading the Qur'an. We recite it, we finish it. Many people finish it 2 times, 3 times. And outside of Ramadan, we continuously recite it. But how many of us pick up a translation to understand the words? How many of us listen and sit down in a tafsir to understand the words of the Qur'an? How many of us follow its halal and haram throughout our lives when we come to dealing with business, when we come to dealing with inheritance, rights, property rights of children, of husbands, of wives, of brothers and sisters? How many of us implement this in marriage, in divorce, in many, many customs that we have in our daily lives? How many of us, in our dress code, in our eating and drinking, in our earnings, how many of us preserve the halal and the haram? We should all ask ourselves. There's always room for improvement. But the other point here is the second point, to read it without any change, without any omission. Today, Muslims in the West, we're under a lot of pressure. There's different pressures on the Muslim community. There's different pressures on religion itself in the West. Not just in the West, in the East as well. There's different pressures on the Muslim community, on even the Qur'an, the Sunnah, the Deen, the understanding of Islam. There's different pressures. There are people, there are groups and academics and writers and speakers and even movements who would like to approach the Qur'an and change it. They would like to change the Qur'an to suit what they think the Qur'an should be. So you'll have, for example, you have a group of people now who don't want to follow any of the Sunnah or Hadith. They call themselves, or people label them as Qur'anists, right? They only follow the Qur'an. They say Hadith, there's too many problems in Hadith. There's weak Hadith, there's fabricated Hadith, there's Sahih Hadith. We don't know, it's all mixed up, it's vague, it's difficult to find which one's authentic, which one isn't. So we just stick to the Qur'an. We know it's authentic, 100%. We rely on this. Hadith is too messy, right? There's so many books of Hadith. Which one do we take? There's apparently conflict in this Hadith against that Hadith. Many Hadith apparently go against the Qur'an, etc. And these people they exist. You see them on social media. They have following. But this completely goes against the Qur'an itself. This is tahrif. This is changing the Qur'an. Because the Qur'an is the one that commands us to follow the Prophet ﷺ. The Qur'an itself commands us. It's obligatory. أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم. Obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obey the messenger and those in authority amongst you. The Qur'an commands us to follow. He is the best example. Uswatun hasana, right? A beautiful pattern of conduct and behavior. That's the Prophet ﷺ. So we're commanded to follow the messenger. How can we follow the messenger if we get rid of hadith? How can we follow the messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam if we negate all of the hadith? This is illogical. It's a contradiction in itself. How will you know how many rak'ah to pray in the salah? It's not mentioned in the Qur'an. How do you know even what to do in the salah? It doesn't mention in the Qur'an. It's mentioned in the Sunnah. Most of the details of Islamic law, of ibadat and mu'amalat, the vast majority of it comes from the Sunnah. There's no way of deriving all of that from the Qur'an. So you have groups, you have people who are Qur'anists, you have feminist movements who would like to come to the Qur'an and interpret the Qur'an according to their mindset, what they believe to be equality between men and women. You know, you have people who want to change the laws of inheritance that are clear-cut in the Qur'an, that are unchangeable verses of the Qur'an, because they perceive in their measurement, in their framework, they perceive injustice here. They perceive gender inequality. So they come and they want to interpret the Qur'an according to what they think how it should be. There are other people, social justice movements, who may want to come to the Qur'an and see the world through their ideology. And similar, it's not just these two, these are just three I've mentioned. You know, reformists, modernists, different labels, different objectives. People who think, you know, Sharia is outdated. We're Muslims, but we can change parts of the Qur'an. Parts of the Qur'an now is no longer applicable. We're living in the modern age, we can change certain verses, we can change certain parts of Sharia. So there's many, many groups and movements out there who want to approach the Qur'an and change its meaning, its legal implications, and those verses which you can't interpret in any other way, they want to change those as well. So this is happening, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, those who recite the Qur'an as it should be recited, they don't do this. They accept the Qur'an, they come to the Qur'an. And, you know, you can't change the Qur'an. Why can't you change the Qur'an? There's two reasons. One is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He took it upon Himself to preserve the Qur'an. إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّ لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. Indeed, we have revealed the reminder. A dhikr here means the Qur'an. And indeed, certainly, we shall preserve it. We are preserving it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guaranteed, He's promised, this Qur'an shall be preserved in word and meaning. In word and meaning. And also the deen itself, in terms of its major aspects of the deen, in terms of everything that's required for the Prophet to have conveyed to the ummah at the time, in terms of everything of the deen, it's already completed. اليوم أكملت لكم نعمتي اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي وَرَضِيتُ لَكُمْ الْإِسْلَامَ دِينًا. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said this, that, you know, He's completed His favors upon you, right? And He's completed the deen. It's complete. There's nothing to change and add. Yes, in fiqh, when you come to apply it to different contexts, different areas, different times, in some aspects of Islamic law, there can be ijtihad, there can be difference of opinion on application. Some things may change due to circumstances, but there is a framework, you know, within the rules of usul al-fiqh, within the rules of the sciences of Islam, which deal with these things, fiqh, usul al-fiqh, qawaid al-fiqh, maqasid al-sharia, all of these things are there. Within that, scholars will work to make the sharia relevant, applicable for all places and all times. But it doesn't mean you can come and just change. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how did He preserve it? He's preserved the Qur'an, not just, you know, all the sciences are preserved as well. You need the sciences to approach the Qur'an. So for the Qur'an itself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired many thousands and thousands of huffaz, of qurra, of specialists memorizers of the Qur'an, who had the strength of memory and precision of the Qur'an to preserve it and then also write it down. For the Sunnah, and not just the Qur'an, the language, Arabic language, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired many scholars to write down the rules of grammar, the rules of sarf, the rules of Arabic language. This is all written down, preserved. Our lexicons, dictionaries. This preserves the Arabic language. Poetry, the Jahili poetry. This preserves the Arabic language. This is all written down and it's recorded. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired many muhaddithin, people who specialized in the collection, recording and sifting of hadith with fantastic memories. You know, they wrote biographical dictionaries, 20, 30 volumes of every single person who is known to have narrated hadith. Every single person is mentioned in there. Thousands of narrators, when they were born, when they passed away, who their teachers were, where they lived, who did they teach to, which hadith they heard. It's all recorded. It's unbelievable amount of scholarship in our science, in our heritage, Islamic heritage. Unbelievable level of scholarship. You won't find anything of this nature in any other civilization. The way hadith, just take one science, forget about everything else. The way hadith has been preserved, the way every narrator, his life has been recorded, the way they know and check the chains and the texts, this is unparalleled. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired people for every science. And these sciences of hadith, of ulum al-Qur'an, of mustalah hadith, of tafsir, subhanallah, how many hundreds of tafsirs we have. All of these sciences, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired people from amongst this ummah to rise up, to study, to make the effort, to strive and to preserve this deen. And these all combine as a support to preserve the actual text of the Qur'an itself. So it's not just the word that's preserved, the meaning, the way to approach it, and the sciences needed to understand it. All of this is preserved. So whatever people do, we must be aware of our heritage. We must understand which things of the Qur'an can be changed. Not the Qur'an, I mean the Sharia. Which things of Islamic law are flexible, which things are fixed. We should have a basic understanding of this. Otherwise, every group that comes will confuse, and they are. People are confusing many people out there. Many people at university, college, many young people are becoming confused by these different groups. So it's very important that we're aware that we don't allow people to come and try and change the Qur'an, to try and change its meaning, the preserved meanings, to try and change the way, the rules, the framework which is agreed upon on how to interpret the verses, how to understand the verses, how to apply the verses. This is very important. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the small point I wanted to make about this verse from last week. So now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues in verse 122. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya bani Israel, udhkuru ni'mati allati an'amtu alaykum, wa anni faddaltukum ala al-alameen. Here, this verse, if you've been following, has been mentioned already. Similar verse was mentioned already, verse number 40, surah Baqarah. And also another few verses down, same thing. Now, from verse 40 to 122, this whole section, it began with Ya Bani Israel and it ends with Ya Bani Israel. In between, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He begins with Ya Bani Israel, O children of Israel, to grab their attention, to alert them. Why? Because He's going to remind them in between all these verses, between verse 40 to 122, He's going to remind them of the favors, the blessings that He sent them, how He favored them amongst all other people. And B, He's going to talk about how they reacted and how they responded, and see some of the arguments that some of them made against the Qur'an or against Allah or against the Prophet ﷺ, and the answers to some of those questions or challenges. So this is contained within all this section that we've been doing for the last almost 7-8 months. All of this was contained from verse 40 to 120. So now this is like a finishing off, a conclusion, if you like, of that whole section. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O children of Israel, recall my favor that I bestowed upon you. Recall my favor. What is this favor? They said that the favor Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about is mainly to do with 2 or 3 things. One is that He sent many prophets amongst them. Many prophets amongst them. He sent messengers, prophets amongst them. This is a huge favor. To bless a community with one messenger is a huge favor. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent many, one after another. Sometimes there will be more than one prophet amongst Bani Israel. Many times there's more than one prophet at the same time. So this is one of the favors. The second favor is that He sent amongst them kings. He gave them kingdoms. He established them on the earth. Throughout their history, at different times, yes, there were times of weakness, but also He gave them many times of strength, of power, of kingdom, of kingship on the land. This is a huge favor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them. Number 3, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes where He saved them from persecution and oppression, like from Fir'aun. He saved them from oppression and persecution and discrimination in the land, from being slaughtered and killed. He saved them. So this is another favor. And there are many other favors mentioned throughout these verses that we have covered. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, recall these favors. What I've mentioned, all these verses from 40 to now, recall all these favors and everything else that I have bestowed upon you, Ya Bani Israel, all children of Israel. وَأَنِّي فَضَّلْتُكُمْ عَلَى الْعَالَمِينَ. And I preferred you, I chose you above al-alameen, above the worlds. I chose you above the worlds, above others in the world. What does this mean? Does it mean that they are the best community from the beginning to the end? Are they the most favored from the beginning to the end? Alameen means worlds, but they said لِكُلِّ زَمَانٍ عَالَمٍ. لِكُلِّ زَمَانٍ عَالَمٍ. So every time, every era, every section of time, if you like, every age is a alam. So in their age, as long as, Bani Israel from the beginning up to, you can say Isa alayhi salam, they were preferred, they were favored compared to other nations. But not from the beginning of mankind till the end. It's not saying that they were favored above everybody since the beginning of the time and the end of time. No. It's saying they were favored above everybody else during the time that they lived. At that particular time, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent them prophets, Yusuf alayhi salam, Musa alayhi salam, and other messengers, Dawood alayhi salam, Sulaiman alayhi salam, when He sent these messengers, during those times He favored them above the rest of the world. He favored them above the rest of the world. Why does He say this? Again, to reiterate, He wants something from them. This is what all these verses have been about since middle of the first juz, from verse number 40. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا. Fear a day. Guard yourself against a day. Prepare yourself for a day. لَا تَجْزِي نَفْسٌ عَنْ نَفْسٍ. A day on which a soul will not avail another soul. Meaning, fear a day, the day of judgment, when you cannot be helped by another soul. Nobody can come and take your place. If your deeds are not good enough, if your balance is a minus, your good deeds are less and your bad deeds are more, no other person can come and take your place. Your father cannot say, save my child, I'll take his place. Your mother cannot say, save him and take me to the hellfire instead. No, nobody can swap your place. Nobody can come and ransom you with their own lives. Nobody. So fear that day. Prepare for that day. وَاتَّقُوا يَوْمًا لَا تَجْزِي نَفْسٌ عَنْ نَفْسٍ شَيْئًا. They cannot avail you of anything. Forget about taking your place in the hellfire. They cannot even give you shay'a. They can't even swap one good deed with you. They cannot even give you one good deed. Forget about taking your place. وَلَا يُقْبَلُ مِنْهَا عَدْلٌ وَلَا يُقْبَلُ مِنْهَا عَدْلٌ. And it will not be accepted. Any payment, any compensation will not be accepted from any single person on that day. Like you can't say, instead of the sins on the balance, let me pay with something instead. Let me pay for my sins. You can't do that. It's too late. Let me pay my way out of hellfire. No, it's not going to be accepted. وَلَا تَنْفَعُهَا شَفَاعَةٌ. And the intercession of the intercessor will not benefit him. The intercession of the intercessor will not benefit. So nobody will be allowed to intercede for that person on the day of judgment. No one who's been given intercession or the power of intercession will be able to benefit you on that day. This is the day you should be fearing, Allah says. وَلَا هُمْ يُنصَرُونَ. Not only this, all these three things, nobody can take your place. You cannot pay any compensation. You can't pay your way out. And nobody can intercede for you. None of your prophets, none of your friends, none of your parents, your brothers, sisters, husbands, wives, nobody can come and intercede for you on that day. Not only that, on top of that, they will not be assisted. They will not be helped by anybody else. So basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, on that day every soul, every single person will be standing alone. Every single person will be standing alone with no help. The only help you have is whatever deeds you did in the dunya. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after explaining all these verses about all the blessings, the ni'mah, the favors that He has given, what have you done with those favors? What have you done? If you haven't responded in the way I wanted you to respond, then fear that day. Fear that day that you cannot pay your way out. Nobody can come and take your place. Nobody can intercede for you. And nobody will come to your aid. Fear that day. So this is like a closing of this whole section. This address to Bani Israel. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, well, the next verse moves on to something we will start next week, inshaAllah. وَإِذِ ابْتَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ رَبُّهُ بِكَلِمَاتٍ. This will start next week, inshaAllah. So here, this verse, yes, is addressed to Bani Israel, but the lessons are for us. The lessons are for you and me. What are the blessings that we have received? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is here confirming and reminding them of the blessings. The first thing He reminds them in the beginning of this section in Surah Baqarah verse 40, and at the end of this section, verse 122, is reminding them of His blessings, of His favors. He orders them to remember His favors to them. And this is what Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah says, that if you want to start your journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you want to know what your purpose in life is, if you want to be reminded, here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya Bani Israel adhkuru ni'mati. Recall, remember. Why? Why should I remember the favors of Allah? So that I can act, I can respond, I can do the right thing in return. If someone does you a favor, what do I do in return? If I don't remember or recall or think, if I'm not even aware of the favors, how can I respond? Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, he says, if you want to respond to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, pause and start thinking of the favors that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. That He's blessed you with life, with health, with security, with wealth, with family, with talent, with the ability to speak, with the ability to see, to hear, right? He's placed you in a world, in the first world. He's placed you in a rich, wealthy country. He didn't place you in a war-torn area, in a famine area, in a poverty-stricken area. You have all the luxuries that the world can offer. The Prophet ﷺ said, in the meaning of a hadith, that if a person wakes up in the morning with his health, he's in good health, and he has his provisions just for that one day, not a week, not a month, not a year. He has his provisions for that one day. He is the wealthiest person. He has more than whatever is in the world. He has everything. Just one day, if you have health and you have your provision for the day, it's better than everything in the world. You have everything that's required from this dunya. Subhanallah. Because there are millions of people who do not wake up with health, and they do not wake up with one day's worth of wealth. So reflect, think, how many blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been coming my way since the day I was born. List them, think of them. وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. If you try to count the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will not be able to enumerate them. You cannot count them. There are too many. These are the blessings that we see. How many blessings we don't see inside of our bodies? How many blessings we don't see outside in terms of what happens externally? We can't see those blessings. We can only see what is limited and feel and hear what is limited. So make a list and reflect on that. And then think about all of those blessings on one side. What have I done in return? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked me to pray 5 times a day. How many prayers have I done? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked me to fast the month of Ramadan every year. How many Ramadans have I fasted? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked me to pay zakat on my wealth. Have I paid all my zakat? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked me to perform hajj when I can afford to do so. Did I do my hajj? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked me to control my tongue from backbiting, from lying, from swearing and abusing. Have I done that? What have I done in return? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me all of these blessings, ni'mah, favors, health, wealth, talent, skills, abilities, comforts. For many, many years, what have I done in return? When you realize that what you've done in return is there's so much of a gap. There is so much of a gap. There's no way that your favors that you received and there's no way that the actions that me and you have done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will match up to the favors that has been given. Then you will recognize and realize that if I were to die today, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala were to account me today, I'm finished, I'm doomed, I am destroyed. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked me about the favors that He gave me, and then I present to Him my ibadah, my broken, deficient, sometimes not even sincere ibadah, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where will I be? I'll be finished. I'm destroyed. So then Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, he says that this is when the slave realizes, he wakes up. He wakes up from his slumber, from his sleep. Most people are sleepwalking through life. الناس نيام وإذا ماتوا استيقظوا. People are asleep, and when they die, they wake up. People are asleep, when they die, they wake up. This is our state. So when we measure the two things, we will wake up. We will realize that I've wasted most of my life. We will realize I haven't been focusing on my purpose of life. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I have not created the jinn and the mankind except to worship me. I will realize my purpose in life, my priority in life has been something else. And then I should rush and race for tawbah, for forgiveness, and to change my life. I should realize that from now on, the remaining time I have left, I don't know how much time I have left. I don't know, it could be tonight, it could be tomorrow. But the journey is long. I've got much work to do to make up this imbalance, this deficit. I have so much to do. I don't know if I can make it. This should be the number one concern of every single believer. The dunya will become insignificant. Where you are in your career, where you are in your business, what's happening around the world will become insignificant. This is how the Sahaba were. They saw that. They had the vision. This nur will enter your heart. This light will enter your heart, and it will allow you to see the reality. The Prophet ﷺ used to say, Allah, show me the reality, the truth as it is. Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqa warzuqna ittiba'a. Oh Allah, show me the truth as it is, reality as it is, and allow me, give me tawfiq to follow the truth. So you see the dunya as it really is. You see where you are in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will see it be very clear to you. You won't be asleep. You won't be heedless. You won't be thinking, inshallah, Allah will forgive me. No. You'll realize, because you'll see it in front of you, the deficit, the imbalance, the shortcomings. And Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah said, if you don't move, if you don't wake up, and if you don't make this decision, then know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will purify you in one of the following ways. He will purify you, because as a believer, if you want to enter Jannah, no one can enter Jannah until they're purified. No one can enter Jannah until they are purified. And he said, Allah will purify you in one of the following ways. One, it could be through musibah in the dunya. You will be afflicted with trials and tribulations. This is not a bad thing, it's a good thing. You don't wish for it, but if it comes, it's a purification of sins. Just like gold has to be purified through trial, through burning, through testing, so the believers need to be purified before they can enter Jannah. If that doesn't do it, then some kind of a illness at the time of death, some kind of suffering at the time of death, that will also purify. Then if that is not enough, then punishment in the grave, that will purify. And if that's not enough, then on the day of judgment, the frightening scenes, the suffering of the day of judgment, the waiting, the sun, a handspan away, all of this will add to your purification. And if that is not enough, then the hellfire. Then the hellfire. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from all of these punishments. Then the hellfire will purify until your sins are purified, until you are purified. Then you will be taken out and you will be entered into Jannah if you are a believer, if you are Muslim. So before you go through all of this, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah said, wake up. Avoid the purification of the punishment of the grave, of the day of judgment, of the terrible scenes of the day of judgment, and of the hellfire. But start now. Make a change in your life. Make that effort to catch up, to make up the shortcomings, the deficiencies, to do shukr. And this is the whole of Sharia. Sharia is how to show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His favors. This is Sharia. How to be grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the blessings He's given you. This is the whole purpose of Sharia. This is the whole objective of Sharia. It shows you how to be grateful. So this is very important for us. We need to be reminded of the favors that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, not just Bani Israel. And we need to make that change. We need to reorientate our lives, because this dunya, one of the names of dunya is gharoor. It will deceive you. And shaitan's name is Al-Gharur. It's the chief deceiver. And this is the nature of the world. It will deceive you. It will make you think you're fine. You don't have to wake up. You don't have to make effort. You're not behind. You're not deficient. You have no shortcomings. You're fine. You pray, alhamdulillah. You do Hajj, you've done Ramadan, you're fine. You'll make it, inshallah. No, you have to strive. But there's a balance. Yes, the fear and the hope. We have that imbalance. We have the fear of the shortcomings, but we have the hope of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that's after we make effort. That's after we made the priority in our lives, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the hereafter. Then hope and fear will help us. But before we make the effort, if we say hope, no. If we say mercy of Allah, no. We have to make the effort. And then we have hope, and we also have the fear. Those are the two wings with which the believer flies. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to really appreciate His blessings upon us, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to see by the light of this realization that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us so many blessings, and that we in return have not done our duty. We have not done as we're meant to do. We are full of shortcomings and deficiencies. We are full of lapses. We are in heedlessness. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us that light in our hearts to see that and to remember that and to reorientate and change our lives so we make it focused towards the journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jazakumullah khairan.